Hello, Year 10, and welcome back to your second lesson for this week. Here we're looking at the consequences of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. If you've not done so yet, can you please complete the first lesson looking at why the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan? Just a reminder on a few things. First of all, you'll be told by me when to pause the video. You might need to make notes, you might need to just think about a task, or you might need to actually complete some tasks on the worksheet you can see on that slide. You should find that worksheet along with this video on Google Classrooms. Please can you make sure you submit the completed worksheet by Sunday the 26th of April at 5 p.m. so we can just check your learning and make sure there's no misconceptions. Now, if anything I say in the video isn't clear, we've also attached the revision guide in Google Classrooms as well for you to read, and hopefully that should help. So, as a starting task, as a recap, we've got 5 key terms to look at. Let's look at the first 3 here now. You don't need to write anything down if you don't want to for these, but these key terms, what relation were they to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan? PDPA, the Mujahideen, and Jihad. Just pause the video, have a quick think, make some notes if you need to. Okay, so the PDPA were an Afghanistan Communist Party, and they took control of Afghanistan in 1978, and they were quickly backed by the Soviet Union. And as you'd expect from a communist party, they brought in changes to the country. These changes involved changes to lands, marriage, and more equality to women. Now, these changes seemed very strange to the traditional Afghans who were there, and it went against the religious beliefs. And so this led to many of them wanting to get rid of the government and the supporters. That group was known as the Mujahideen, who picked up popularity as more and more people became confused by these law changes and wanted to stop them from taking place. And it seemed fighting the PDPA to remove them from the country was the only way to do this. And Jihad was the name for that fight, or holy war, where actually they were fighting to get rid of the atheist PDPA and restore the religious laws in their country. 2 more key terms. So, who was Brezhnev, and what's the Persian Gulf region? Again, press pause and then play once you're sure. Okay, so Brezhnev was the leader of the Soviet Union at the time. And Brezhnev eventually sent the Red Army in 1979 to support the PDPA in their struggle. Now, he said the Soviets were just helping a communist ally and they would leave afterwards. But that's not how America saw it. America saw this as an invasion. Why did America see this as an invasion? Well, we need to look at the Persian Gulf region. And as we can see on the map here, those red dots are oil fields, controlled by America in the countries like Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. Now that's the Persian Gulf region. America makes a lot of money and their economy is strong because of this area. And America thought, well, hang on a minute. Once the Soviets take control of Afghanistan, they could use that as a stepping stone. They could then take control of Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia and take the oil fields. That would make their economy a lot stronger, and it would financially ruin America. It would be the Soviet way of quickly winning the Cold War. And so America became very paranoid about these oil fields. So we need to know that the Persian Gulf region is the reason why the USA saw the Soviets moving into Afghanistan as a threat. Because of the oil fields there, they thought once you've taken control of Afghanistan, you can take control of these other countries. Why wouldn't you? All the economical opportunities available with the oil there, it would destroy us as a rival, and it would mean you could win the Cold War. You would be the most powerful country. America was determined to make sure that the USSR could never take control of Afghanistan, so that the threat of the Persian Gulf region falling would never happen. And so the president at the time, Jimmy Carter, is pictured on the left back in 1979, and he's still alive today. 2020, he's going to be 96 this year. First president to ever hit the age of 95. He's still active in politics. But Carter had to seem tough back then. He had to seem like he was standing up to the Soviets, and so he took a number of actions. The first thing he did was he came up with the Carter Doctrine, a sort of new rule, a set of beliefs. And this new rule said America would use force if necessary to repel any threat to American interests in the Persian Gulf. And loosely translated, that basically means, look, if you come near the oil fields in Iraq, Iran, or Saudi Arabia, we will attack you as a direct threat. And to make sure that those countries weren't going to be invaded, he also promised military aid to countries that were bordering Afghanistan if needed, just in case the Soviets actually started to move and take control of other areas. It also meant that SALT II was not ratified or finalised. Now, this had been 5 years of talks from 1974 to 1979 for both sides to actually reduce nuclear weapons and get rid of them, to try to make the world a safer place. And it was so close to actually being agreed and worked upon. It had taken 5 years of talks, but it never happens. Carter just says, nope, forget it. It's not worth trusting the Russians at this point. And so we don't see nuclear weapons being reduced until late into the 1980s. He also wanted to make sure that Russia was punished from an economic point of view by passing sanctions. So they wanted Russia to be able to stop making money and stop growing their economy. And examples of this include the fact that during that period of peace détente, America had sent over cheap shipments of grain to Russia. Well, they were now stopped. America had also traded technology with Russia to help them to grow, again a sign of trust between the two. Things like computers, oil drilling equipment, and again, that was now stopped. They said, no, forget it, that's not going to happen. And again, these were things that had been allowed and encouraged under that period of peace known as détente. And perhaps more incredibly is the fact that America had the idea of, well, we need to make sure that Afghanistan is not conquered by the Soviet Union. Therefore, let's help the Soviet Union's enemies. Let's help the Mujahideen. And well done if you spotted Bin Laden in the picture below. Bin Laden was a part of the Mujahideen. And America said, we need to give them equipment, we need to give them training, we need to make sure they can fight and repel the Soviets. Something that America would come to regret just over 20 years later. And perhaps more incredibly is the 1980 Moscow Olympic Games boycotts. Now, in 1974, it was decided that the Olympic Games would be held in Moscow. And America said, we're not going. Not only are we not going, but 60 other countries aren't going to go as well. America used a campaign to try to ensure these countries didn't take part. Famous Americans like Muhammad Ali, the boxer, went to places like Nigeria and Kenya, for example, and he said, look, don't go. And in total, over 60 other nations refused to go as well to the Olympic Games. Well, so what? Well, if you think about the Olympic Games, these are a global spectacle. They only happen once every 4 years. And the whole point is to see who's the best in the world. And when a lot of the world doesn't turn up, it ruins it completely. It's fairly pointless. It loses the whole meaning. Especially when you think about the amount of money that was put into the Olympic Games. These have been planned, like I said, since 1974. And so Russia had spent a lot of money on the Games. They'd seen this as an opportunity to make communism look fantastic to the world. And that was gone. It was ruined as a spectacle. Now, more interestingly, what happens to the United Kingdom? Well, you'd expect us to follow America's lead, wouldn't you? But Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister at the time, wasn't as harsh as Carter. Carter had said, look, if you go, we're going to take your passports away from you to the athletes. But Thatcher said to the athletes, we strongly recommend you not to go. And so typically our athletes actually, a lot of them go. It's an opportunity for medals. 60 other countries aren't going to be there. And we end up with 21 medals. We position 9th in the table, which is fairly impressive until you compare that to the Soviet Union's 195 medals in total, obviously in first place, and even Cuba managed 4th place ahead of us. Now, I'd like you to pause the video here, and I'd like you to have a look, please, at task 1. Can you please explain 5 actions the USA took against the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan? Once you're done with that, can you think and explain to me what action of those 5 do you think would have hurt the USSR the most and why? Think about it in terms of pride, think about it in terms of status, the economy, Which of those 5 do you think would have hurt the USSR the most and why? Okay, if you need any help, the slides we've looked at are all the ones with yellow backgrounds if you need to go back in the video at all. Once you're done, press play again. And let's move quickly on to task 2. Now, some historians think that the USA were deliberately overreacting, that actually they wanted détente gone, they wanted to get tough with Russia. Some people say, no, that's not the case at all, and actually Russia were protecting the oil, that it was a viable threat. We'd seen the Soviets take control of other countries before, and they had to react now before the Soviets were actually in the Persian Gulf region. Now, bear in mind, of course, Russia said they would leave once they'd helped their ally out. They had no intention of moving on to other countries. So I'm interested, guys. What do you think? Do you think the USA overreacted to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan? Or do you think they were right in being harsh to the USSR? And can you explain your reasoning for me, please? Okay, so what happened next? Well, there was an election campaign in 1980. Jimmy Carter ran up against Ronald Reagan. And we'll talk about Reagan in another lesson, but you can see on the map there, Reagan wins a landslide. It's one of the biggest US victories of all time. And Reagan basically focused his whole campaign on being anti-communist. He said communism is an evil that should be opposed, and it was clearly very popular with the Americans at the time. Now, what happens to the Olympic Games 4 years later? Well, they were in Los Angeles, as you can see, in America. And if you're looking to get me a leaving gift, by the way, I've put a picture there. If you want to get me a nice leaving gift, the end of year 11, you can see the hat there. Get it off eBay. I don't know how much it'll cost. Doesn't matter. But plan it properly. I don't want a load of you buying me hats. Just one of you, okay? But moving back onto the topic, you can imagine what the USSR did when the games were in America. Yep, they boycotted them as well. USSR and the satellite states, the countries they controlled like Poland, Bulgaria and so on, they said, we're not going to these games. And they left it till the last minute to basically drop out. Ruin the games as a spectacle for America. So this tension increased between the two superpowers as a result. And just as an aside, don't mention this in your exam, but McDonald's, who was sponsors of the Olympic Games for some reason, McDonald's did a promotion offer, with the 1984 games, where basically whatever you bought, like it was a Coke or fries, for example, you got a little scratch card, sort of like the Monopoly you've got today. And you would have a scratch card like you can see on the screen, and you would scribble out the medal, and you would have an event like shot put or 200 meters or decathlon, for example. And you would wait and you would see the event. And if America won a bronze, you got a Coke. If they won silver, you got fries. And if they won gold, you got a Big Mac. Now, the idea was actually Russia would turn up. The Soviet Union, a huge superpower, it would mean that actually the medals would be fairly divided. Once the USSR do not turn up, this is a financial disaster for America, who win a lot of medals. And so people basically keep getting free stuff. They go and get their free Big Mac or their free Coke. They get another card. And there were some families who basically just kept fed during the Olympic Games with McDonald's the whole time. It nearly financially bankrupted them as a result. So, with that said, let's have a look at task 3. And can you just make a note for me, please? What key events happened in 1980 and 1984? And can you explain why did both events make relations worse between the East and West? Okay, think about Ronald Reagan being anti-communist, saying anti-communist things for his election campaign. Think about how the Olympic Games were ruined for America as a result as well. If you need to go back over any information, it's the green slides you're looking for. And then just press play when you're done to finish the lesson. Okay, and that's pretty much it for this lesson. Thank you very much. A reminder again, please can you make sure that both completed worksheets looking at why did the Soviet Union invade Afghanistan and what were the consequences of this invasion are submitted to your teacher by Sunday, the 26th of April at 5 p.m. If you've got any queries or any questions, email your teacher or email me. If you've got any feedback about these lessons, please feel free to email me there at gbrown@stopseyhighschool.co.uk. And like I've said before, now you've completed the work, please make sure you have a break. If you're able to, go out in the garden, go out and get some fresh air. And as always, guys, please make sure that you stay safe. Thank you very much for your hard work, and I'll see you soon. Take care.